Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, it is officially the new league year in the NFL, and deals are being made, including for running backs. They're just not getting a lot of money. So what does that mean for running back Josh Jacobs? We'll talk about that, plus news and notes of the day and your calls and texts. We'll all close out the show. It's all coming up on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, March 16th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you get the latest episode of the Locked On Raiders podcast. And, of course, if you're checking out YouTube, it's because my man Ari is making it happen. You can check out Ari on Twitter at Ari Sports. Today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And let's go ahead and get started on the news and notes here in segment number one. And as I mentioned, all the deals are becoming official and are official. Trades, signings, all that good stuff. It is now the 2023 league year, which is crazy. I remember just being in Phoenix, Arizona for the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the Eagles, and it feels like it was just yesterday. And here we are. We're already talking about another season. Of course, there'll be a little bit of a lull during the summertime when, everyone goes away and they go on break in between, rookie mini camp and, OTAs and all that good stuff, and before they get ready for training camp. But man, it is already another league year. We got the owners meetings coming up at the end of the month, and then the draft at the end of April, and then, man, it's on and popping. So we'll be back at it before you know it and be talking about some football activities. But let's go ahead and jump into the news and notes. And off top, the Raiders decided to bring back defensive tackle Jerry Tillery. According to my guy Jordan Schultz from The Score, he actually tweeted out and sent me a text that the Raiders and Jerry Tillery agreed to terms to return. He was the guy that the Raiders picked up off of waivers after the Chargers released him halfway through the season. He was also the guy that had that 15-yard penalty at the end of that Thursday game against the Rams, where the Rams had to go 98 yards, and he knocked the ball out of Baker Mayfield's hands. It was a 15-yard penalty, and it gave them new life, and the Rams go on to win that game. Boneheaded decision by Jerry Tillery, and he's been known to make some kind of bad decisions from time to time. That's what made him really expendable when he was with the Chargers as a former first-round pick. They got tired of the penalties. He is a guy, though, on the plus side that can get to the quarterback from the defensive tackle position, and we talk about it all the time. The Raiders need to increase their pressure from the interior part of the defensive line, so he'll be part of a rotation. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be relied upon all the time, but I do think it's a pretty good signing, and hopefully you don't see any more bad decisions like that, stupid penalties at the end of games that will cost the Raiders. But Jerry Tillery back with the silver and black brings a little bit of nasty to that defensive line as well. I think that is okay. As far as other moves that they made the signing for Roderick Teamer. They made that official. Safety Roderick Teamer, that was actually talked about the other day, but they sent out a post saying that the Raiders have re-signed restricted free agent safety Roderick Teamer. He appeared in all 17 games for the first time in his career in 2022, making 3 starts and recording 35 tackles and 5 special team stops. Teamer was a guy that was originally signed as an undrafted free agent by the Chargers back in 2019 and signed with the Raiders back in June of 2021. 6'5", 205-pound safety. He's been in 34 career games, 11 starts, 89 total tackles, 1 sack, 1 interception, 3 passes defense, and had 9 tackles on special teams. Not a big deal, not a big sexy signing, Roderick Teamer, but he's a guy that could fill a void, right? He's a guy that plays special teams. He's a guy that can go out there and provides a little bit of physicality, and he's a guy that'll at least somewhat fill a void and fill a hole right now. Who knows what the Raiders are going to do when they get to the draft, but right now they're signing a bunch of free agents that none of them have big-time names. None of them have huge contracts. It's just not going to happen. That they're not in position to do that right now. At some point, after this team gets built, if everything goes the way that they are expecting it to go, and hopefully if everything goes the way that Raider Nation wants it to go, where this team is built correctly, and at some point they could be consistent winners, similar to the 49ers, then they'll be at some point able to go out and sign a Hargrave, for a big-time deal, because the team will be built, so they'll be able to go ahead and sign a big-time free agent and not try to build a complete team through free agency. That's what they're trying to avoid at all costs, so they're just bringing in low-level names, guys that could fill a void. They're hoping that they can get certain stuff out of, certain production out of guys and go from there as they're trying to build the team through the draft. So, I mean, that's really what their plan is. So when you look at a Roderick teamer, it's not going to be a guy that's going to wow you, but it just kind of is what it is. Also, I didn't know the salary or the contract that the Raiders gave Brandon Faison, but according to overthecap.com, 2 years, $6.5 million contract, only $700,000 guaranteed. So basically, they could walk away from Brandon Faison anytime they want. They don't like what he's doing, or if they get someone that can fill that void, they can say, hey, peace out. You're gone. $700,000 guarantee in the NFL is absolutely nothing. So, again, just a very low-level free agent. They brought him in. I was actually surprised that they did. I thought he fit better with the Gus Bradley scheme, but apparently they see something, probably the physicality from him, a guy that could do a little bump and run at the line of scrimmage. Probably something that they like. But, again, it's not going to be a guy that I think that they're going to rely on. He'll be a guy that's a piece of depth at best. Because he's not going to be an every down starter, as the Raiders had him being an every down starter at one point due to injury when he was with the team a couple seasons ago. So there was that. Also, the Raiders lost a guy on Wednesday, Cleve Ferrell, the former first-round draft pick. He continued that pipeline to San Francisco, as a lot of guys that leave the Raiders end up with the 49ers. Well, Cleve Ferrell has agreed to terms with a one-year deal with the San Francisco 49ers. I never had a problem with Cleve. We all know that he was drafted way too high. 4 was not where he should have been drafted, but that's where the staff drafted him. That's not on him. But what is on him is effort, and he always gave effort no matter what. No matter what position he was asked to play, no matter what position he was put in, he always gave the maximum effort. Again, I have nothing against him. He was always a good locker room dude. Anytime we had an opportunity to talk to him, he always kept it real and talked to us. And again, he knows that he's not a star, and he knows that he was overdrafted, but he never, walked around with a chip on his shoulder or anything. Just really a good dude. So, I mean, I wish him the best. Hopefully he goes to San Francisco and he's able to do some things and then turn that one-year deal into a lucrative contract, similar to what you saw Arden Key. Arden Key left the Raiders, went to San Francisco, had 6.5 sacks, went to Jacksonville, had a nice little deal there, and he just recently signed, a 3-year, $21 million deal with the Titans. So I'm not mad at guys that go and have success. I mean, it's hard to get to the NFL, and it's even harder to stay in the NFL. So I don't care who they're playing for. I still got respect for them because I know how hard of a job it is to survive in the NFL. So Cleve Ferrell heads to San Francisco, and, of course, I wish him the best. The Raiders may be losing Denzel Perryman. He's visiting with the Houston Texans today. He is a priority, according to many, including my guy Aaron Wilson, who covers the Texans like a glove for the Houston, used to be the Houston Chronicle. He's actually Channel 2 News now in Houston, but said that Denzel Perryman is a priority for D'Amico Ryans and that new staff there in Houston. So Denzel's going to be visiting with Houston today, potentially. Maybe he signs a deal, or maybe he brings a deal back to the Raiders and say, hey, this is what Houston wants to give me. Are you willing to match it? And then see what happens. But Denzel Perryman taking his first free agent visit today. Also going on today, the Raiders are going to be having the free agents that they have signed from outside of the building meet with the media today. So starting at 11 o'clock this morning Pacific time, depending on what time you're listening, it might already be going on or might be over or it might be happening in a little bit. At 11 a.m. this morning Pacific time, Marcus Epps, Brandon Faison, Jacoby Myers, Robert Spillane, and Philip Dorsett will all be meeting with us at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. And then at noon, quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo will have his media session. So I'll bring you all kind of sound from that on tomorrow's show, talk about the meet and greet on tomorrow's show, and everything else that goes down at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. We'll definitely do that on tomorrow's show. But just know that all the free agents that they brought in from outside the building, Epps, Faison, Myers, Spillane, Dorsett, and Garoppolo, will all meet at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center today. Coming up in segment number 2, going to talk about the running back position because Josh Jacobs is holding the franchise tag. We know that a lot of running backs have been signed, and we're really actively signing on Wednesday, but they weren't signing for a lot of money. So I really don't believe that Josh Jacobs is going to get a huge contract, and I'll tell you why coming up in segment number 2 after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. It's well beyond the midway point of the NBA season. Matter of fact, teams are jockeying for playoff position right now, so it's the perfect time to download FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. All you got to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on anything. Money line, points scored, threes that are hitting the game. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn about more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about the running back market, and we already know that the running backs are so devalued in the NFL, and it's a shame because, man, it's such an important position. And then you think about Josh Jacobs and the season that he put in for the Silver and Black, leading the league in rushing over 1,600 yards. I mean, that's, again, just think about that. Over 1,600 yards is what Josh Jacobs had, and, of course, gets hits with the franchise tag, and that's worth $10 million, which is not a bad chunk of change, right? Not at all. The fifth-year option that he could have had was only $8 million. So it's still a $2 million bonus based off of what he was supposed to get with the fifth-year option. They declined that. So he's going to get at least $10 million if and when he signs a franchise tag. And I do believe he'll do that at some point. And I do believe that the Raiders will give him a deal, a long-term deal, but I believe it's going to be front-loaded. I really do. And this is coming from nowhere but my gut. Nobody has told me this. Nobody has indicated this. I just think that they're going to find a way to front load some cash and keep Josh Jacobs happy and keep him in the mix, because I think you have to keep him in the mix. And at the end of the day, very worst, I mean, and they have till about, mid-July to get a long-term deal done. Then he'll end up signing the franchise tag and playing for a 1 year, $10 million guarantee, which is not bad. Saquon Barkley with the Giants also hit with the $10 million franchise tag. Tony Pollard with the Cowboys also hit with the $10 million franchise tag. And you're probably asking, well, okay, Q, why are you bringing this up? Why does this even matter? Well, look at the market and the guys that have signed right now. And I'm not saying any of the guys that I'm going to give you their details and where they're going and their free agent money. I'm not saying any of those guys are Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, or even Tony Pollard, who's actually injured. He broke his leg at the end of the season, so he's going to miss a little bit of time. But all three of those guys got hit with the franchise tag. Everyone else is either a free agent or they just signed a deal that's not very lucrative. And funny, let's start with the guy who's a free agent. How about Zeke Elliott? He gets released on Wednesday. It's going to be a post-June 1st release. They'll officially put that as a post-June 1st release so they can split up his cap hit. But remember, there was a time when Zeke Elliott was the dude, the best running back in the league, and now all of a sudden he's on the outside looking in. Think about this. He played for the Cowboys for 7 years. In 7 years, he had 10,498 all-purpose yards, led the league in rushing twice in 2016 and 2018, ranks third in franchise history in rushing yards and rushing TDs behind Hall of Famers Emmitt Smith and Tony Dorsett. I tell you that because, again, this is a guy that was a very valued player, one of the best players in the NFL at one point, only played with this team for 7 years and is gone. Now, you go back and think about Josh Jacobs. He's played with the Raiders for 4 years. So, again, Zeke Elliott signed a big, fat contract extension at one point. It was worth like $90 million, right? It was crazy money. He played basically 2 years of that contract money, that extended contract money, 2 years, and then they were gone. They were done with them. They moved on to Tony Pollard, and he's hit with the franchise tag, so he's going to get $10 million. But think about it. He's that valuable to the Cowboys where he's behind Hall of Famers Tony Dorsett and Emmitt Smith, and that's it. You know what I mean? And they still put him out to dry because, well, he's just not the guy that he was. So how about some guys that did sign deals? Miles Sanders. He was just in the Super Bowl with the Eagles. He signed with the Panthers. He signed a deal that's 4 years, $25 million. So you do the math. Do the math on that, right? $7 million a year would make it $28 million. So that's less than $7 million a year. Again, remember, Josh Jacobs has $10 million guaranteed this year on the franchise tag. Jamal Williams, not a bad running back. You know, he was playing with the Lions. He's now going to the Saints. He signed a 3-year, $12 million deal, $8 million fully guaranteed. And you know what that means? He got basically an $8 million deal. That's basically what that means. I mean, yeah, they have the option to keep him around longer than that, but what's guaranteed is $8 million. And he signed a 3-year, $12 million deal. Again, remember, Josh Jacobs, $10 million, 1 year, fully guaranteed. How about Justice Hill? He re-signed with the Ravens. He stuck around Baltimore. They re-signed him to a 2-year, $4.5 million deal with a max value of up to $5 million. Think about that. And again, I'm not trying to compare these guys to Josh Jacobs, but I'm talking about the position because that's what matters is the position. It's not the player. I think the days of the Christian McCaffreys getting mad cash are done. I don't think Saquon Barkley is going to get mad cash with the Giants. I think those are done. I don't think Josh Jacobs is going to get a massive deal. So I think that this all really plays into the favor of the Raiders, who we all know by all the free agent moves that they've made don't want to give out big money. So they give them a little bit more cash than the rest of these guys are getting on the free agent market. Then there's not a whole lot Josh Jacobs could do. As much as I want him to get paid as much as possible, I'm a big Josh Jacobs fan. Let me put that first. First and foremost, I want him to break the bank if possible, right? But it just doesn't seem realistic in today's NFL when it comes to the running back position. How about David Montgomery? That young man that played for the Bears. He was a really good running back. He just went to the Lions. 3-year, $18 million deal. You do the math. That's $6 million a year. Again, Josh Jacobs, 1 year, $10 million fully guaranteed. Travis Homer, Seahawks to the Bears. So the Bears lose David Montgomery. He goes to the Lions, so they bring in Travis Homer from the Seahawks. And see how these rotating doors, they're not even worried about it. Travis Homer's not the running back that David Montgomery is, but they figured, you know what? We can get value out of him. So he goes from Seattle to Chicago, 2-year deal worth a maximum, not a minimum, maximum of $4.5 million. Think about that. Hardly anything. David Montgomery takes off, goes to the Lions, gets about $6 million a year, and Travis Homer replaces him. 2 years, $4.5 million max. That means if he hits his incentives, nothing. Alexander Madison, he's with the Vikings. He stays with the Vikings. Of course, they have, obviously they have Dalvin Cook there too, but they're looking like that they're going to move on from Dalvin Cook. But he's a top running back. He's staying there, a 2-year deal with Minnesota. Worth $7 million. That can get all the way up to $8 million. don't get it twisted. That $7 million could go to $8 million. So, if he goes and plays really, really well, he could make $8 million, $6.3 million in guarantees. That, again, that's a 2-year deal. And then James Robinson, he went from the Jags, he went to the Jets. Remember the Jets after Breece Hall got hurt, tore his ACL in the regular season. The Jets traded for him, so James Robinson went from the Jags to the Jets. Now he's a member of the Patriots. He signed a 2-year deal, $8 million. So again, not big money dished out for running backs. So when you're looking at Josh Jacobs, he's put the hero turned villain. He doesn't like the franchise tag. Nobody does. Right? If I had an opportunity to get a franchise tag, I wouldn't like it either, right? Nobody does because it's a 1-year deal. It's not guaranteed any longer than that 1-year deal. Anything could happen. A guy can get hurt, especially at that position, so I get it. But if you're a fan and you're worried about, well, maybe Josh Jacobs isn't going to want to sign it because it's only a $10 million guarantee, look at all the money that these guys are getting and the lack of big-time guarantees that they're getting. That, to me, makes me feel like if the Raiders just throw a little bit of, guaranteed money up front, they could even get a 2 or 3 year deal with them and just guarantee maybe the first 2 years. And that's a whole lot more cash than these other guys are getting. And you see how these names are just interchangeable. None of them are guys that lead the league in rushing. I'm never going to say that any of these guys could lead the league in rushing, but they're all guys that these teams feel comfortable with handing the ball to and let them do what they do, right? Again, they don't have to be Josh Jacobs. And again, Zeke Elliott's out there available. And he's not the Zeke Elliott that he once was, but the dude has almost 10,500 all-purpose yards, and he's only behind Emmitt Smith and Tony Dorsett in total rushing yards in franchise history for the Cowboys. He's out on the open market right now looking for work, right? So Josh Jacobs has had one phenomenal year. He's also had, 3 good years with the Raiders, but he had one phenomenal year this last year where he led the league in rushing. So, just think about that. Even Saquon Barkley, he's been injured most of his career, so they hit him with the franchise tag. Tony Pollard, he hasn't even been a full-time starter yet in his career, and they hit him with the franchise tag. So, again, those guys getting $10 million guaranteed money, that's decent money. That's actually really good money for the position that they play, unfortunately. It's not quarterback. It's not wide receiver. It's not edge rusher, right? It's not tackles, offensive linemen. Those guys are getting paid good money. It's running back. Running backs don't get the money and the guaranteed money that the rest of these other positions get. So I feel very confident saying the Raiders will find a way to get it done with Josh Jacobs, and he'll realize that the grass is not going to be greener on the other side, right? He can go outside of the building, but I don't think that he's going to see or like the different offers that may roll his way, if any offers roll his way, as he's a franchise tag holder. I don't see teams trading for him. They would have to give up 2 first-round picks unless the Raiders decide to negotiate something else with that team. I don't see that happening either. It's just, to me, like I said, doesn't feel realistic. But that's what we got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Just want to kind of put in perspective what running backs around the league are making these days. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. This is the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Meatloaf from the 951. He's calling to talk about a few subjects, including Aaron Rodgers, Darren Waller, the number 7 overall pick, and a little bit more. Here he is, Meatloaf from the 951.
Hey, Q. It's Meatloaf from the 951. Hope all's good. Just wanted to drop a little non-biased opinion. There's been a lot of mad Raider fans, but I think if we take a step back, kind of look at the situation on how everything's playing out right now, with Rodgers and the drama of, is he going to retire, cold feet, hot feet, halfway in, halfway out type of attitude. I'm glad we didn't sign Rodgers. I don't want somebody playing for the Raiders that doesn't want to be on the field. Second, there's been rumors, don't know if they're true, that Waller didn't invite McDaniels to his wedding. I don't know why anybody would be offended, but I was thinking last year there were also rumors that he was holding out on the Raiders because he had a rift between the coaches, some of the players on the team, things like that. So, and plus he was hurt. I love Waller. I love his story. Amazing story, but he's just injury prone. He's older. I don't hate that we got rid of Waller, especially if he doesn't want to play for the Raiders. Get him out. Get him out of the building. We don't need that type of negativity in our building. So just with all that being said, I don't see us landing that quarterback at 7. I know it's already been said on the podcast. Would be interested in trading away that number 7 pick, seeing what we can get for it, and going from there. Not the biggest Jimmy G guy, but at the end of the day, he's going to show up. I know that the players in the league respect him. He's going to do the right thing, and we just have so many holes right now. I don't think us even signing, Rodgers or Lamar would automatically put us into playoff mode. Lamar might, but, way too high, way too much capital going on, way too much of an investment going on for someone that I think that we would have to change our complete offensive plan to have Lamar in the building. So keep your heads up, Raider Nation. It's going to be okay. It might be a tough season, and it's kind of feeling that way, but at the end of the day, we are family. Hopefully this means tickets will go cheaper to get into a Raider game this year. I wouldn't be too excited going down there, but just going to Vegas and watching the Raiders, I'd be cool with that. But keep your head up, guys. Peace and love.
Thank you for the call, my man. Appreciate you. And yeah, when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, man, you're spot on. Of course, Aaron Rodgers was the guy that piqued my interest when it came to available quarterbacks. I thought, hey, mixing him back up with Devontae Adams would be fantastic. Seeing him in Allegiant Stadium would be great. But to hear that Green Bay wants 2 first-round picks for him, not worth it. 39 years old, not worth it. He's a guy that's got 1 foot in and 1 foot out all the time, not worth it. If it was something reasonable, and that's what I talked about here on the show, if the draft capital was reasonable, maybe that's another subject. And the Raiders did call Green Bay to see what it would take, but they realized early, quick, fast, and in a hurry, matter of fact, that they were out on Aaron Rodgers. And that's when we talked about it here on the show that, well, that subject was out. So then they go and make the move for Jimmy G. As far as Waller and the trade and his wedding and all that, I don't, Kelsey put out that tweet where she said that maybe Waller got traded because Josh McDaniels wasn't traded or wasn't invited to the wedding. It had nothing to do with that. She even tweeted later that I was just joking about that, but a lot of outlets really ran. They didn't invite anyone really to the wedding. They had a very small amount of people invited to the wedding because nobody was supposed to know about it. And the only reason that people knew about it was when we were at the combine, Josh McDaniels said something to us like, hey, when are you guys getting back in town? And we said Saturday. He said, oh, you're going to miss Max's wedding. You're going to miss Darren's wedding. You're going to miss the fights. And it caught our attention. And so we said, wait, Darren's wedding? He said, yeah, Darren's getting married on Saturday. So then later on, Vinny asked Dave Ziegler about it. And he was like, yeah, thinking that Vinny already knew that Darren was getting married. So he's like, yeah, Darren's getting married on Saturday. That's how we found out. And then Vinny said, he wrote an article about it because, well, his publisher found out and said, you got to write an article. So he wrote an article about it. That's the only reason that it even got out, that Darren Waller and Kelsey were getting married. So it wasn't a thing like, Josh McDaniels got mad because he didn't get invited and that's why he got traded. It had nothing to do with that. They actually were a little upset that all of us found out about it, to the point where Kelsey even called Vinny and was like, hey, can you take that piece down? We didn't want people to know. We were just going to show up one day and be like, hey, by the way, we're married. Well, it was too late by that time. Once it hits the internet, it's a wrap. So it was already too late, so there's really nothing they can do. So the trade of Waller to New York had nothing to do with the fact that Josh McDaniels had talked about his wedding. It had nothing to do with that. It was something that went back to last year where Darren Waller, everyone thought he was going to get traded before the trade deadline, and it just didn't happen. It didn't materialize. So I wouldn't take the whole wedding thing too seriously. He's got an opportunity now. He's already met with the media in New York. He's got that opportunity to be there and kind of get his career revamped. And he even said that, hey, I got to stay healthy. I'm going to change my offseason workout plan because I've got to stay healthy and be available. He just, at the end of the day, hasn't been available the last 2 seasons consistently enough for the Raiders, especially this new staff that wasn't their guy. So they moved on. They got all they could for him, a 3rd-round pick. They could have got a 2nd-round pick last year. They waited and didn't. So that's on them. That's all they were able to get. As far as the number 7 overall pick, that's going to be interesting to see what they do. I mean, right now the Raiders have a lot of different options at number 7, including just letting the board fall to them and getting the best defensive player that's available, which, as we all know, defense is a must. They've got to be able to improve that defense. So right now, I mean, I would say all bets are off at number 7. Who knows what they're going to do? We'll obviously have a better feeling about it closer to the draft, but that's not till the end of April. But thank you so much, Meatloaf, for that call. Appreciate you. It's good to hear from you. Next up, got a text from Refrigerator Raider. It's been a minute we've heard from him. He said, "Yo, Q, I wish Waller well, but I also wish he wasn't traded. But I anticipate more than just a little bit of shaking and moving on draft day. I like one of those 3 cornerbacks, Witherspoon, Porter, and Gonzalez. If we stick at 7, though, thanks, Q. It's Refrigerator Raider. Thanks for that text. And, yeah, going back to what Meatloaf just said about the number 7 overall pick, and I told you anything is possible. Gonzalez at 7 would be fantastic. Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon, man, that guy can play. And they haven't drafted a cornerback that high since what, Charles Woodson? When they drafted him at number 4 overall, and I'm not saying he's going to be C. Wood, but, I mean, that's how good Charles was. Christian is a really good player. He's tall. He's got that range. He could play press man-to-man coverage. I wouldn't have a problem grabbing him at 7 or maybe even trading back a little bit and getting him maybe in the teens. I don't know, but I would have no problem with that. Joey Porter Jr., he's a hell of a player. And Devin Witherspoon, I really like. And unfortunately, when Illinois had their pro day, his hamstring was jacked up, and that was what was actually hurting him at the combine while he was the last guy to come out and talk at the podium. We got some good time with him, and he's a very confident dude. He plays the coverage. Really, he's very physical on the outside. I like that a lot about him, but he's got to be being able to stay healthy. And, man, hamstrings already, it's kind of a concern. So that may be something that the Raiders look at. Okay, maybe we'll get Witherspoon only if we could trade back some, right? I mean, that could be the conversation. But Gonzalez and Porter, I could definitely see one of those guys going at number 7. I would have no problem with that as well. Thank you for that text. I do appreciate you. Next up, got a call from the 778. I don't have a name on it, but he's pretty fired up about the moves the Raiders have made so far and not fired up in a bad way. Here it is. A call from the 778.
Hey, yo, Q, Raider Nation is going crazy right now. But here's the thing. Let's slow down a bit. I actually think this move that these guys are making is really, really smart. Look, Jimmy G's not the best answer, but he's a good answer. He's a good breach quarterback. If you're going to draft a quarterback, maybe with that second that's going to sit for a bit, or even in the second round, I think Jimmy G really, really covers that. So I think that's a good move. Signing Jacoby Myers, also a really smart move. And you know what? What this really tells me is they're going to go ham when it comes to defense in the draft. And I actually think that's the best way to build the defense to the draft. If you sign 6, maybe even 7 defensive players, there's a good chance that 3, maybe 4 of them are going to be good starters for you. And you might even be able to make out with at least one superstar out of there. That would be a really good defensive draft. So despite the fact that people are saying we're not signing any big names, we're not getting people they want to see. They want to see Aaron Rodgers. They want to see this. They want to see that. I actually think what the team is doing right now might be the best option. We are about to see the biggest transformation for the Raiders in terms of players, and I think this might be good. I don't know for sure. It could all fall apart, and if it does, we'll just move on from Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler and start over. But if this works out, this might be really good. That's all I've got to say. That's all you do, Q. Keep it up. Raider Nation, relax. This could possibly work out for us. Just relax a bit. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for the call, my man. Sorry I didn't get your name, but, I mean, the approach that you're talking about is the approach that they're taking, bringing in who they want and who they think will help them win, right? That's the same thing that every staff does. I use this example on the radio on Wednesday. I said, look, it doesn't matter what walk of life you're in. Anytime that there is new management takes over, they want people in place that think like them, that operate like them, that just know what they want and how they want it, instead of having to try to coach somebody up more and get more out of them, or, convince them to think their way. It's just what happens. Right. And I use myself for an example when I was at ESPN Central Texas. Right. And I was there. I was doing a hell of a job. Some other guy came in and he didn't like me because I was too much like the last guy. right? I wasn't like him. I was like the last guy, and the last guy was a whole hell of a lot better than him, right? So he didn't like that. So I was one of the first people that he looked at like, yeah, we got to get this guy out of here. Now, I, eventually made the move myself. He didn't get an opportunity to fire me like he would want to, but that's just an example. Like, guys always want guys they're comfortable with. They don't want guys that are better than them. They don't want guys that'll make them look bad. They want guys that are, on their level, thinking like they think, operate like they operate, and are their guys. And honestly, when it comes to, other people, they want guys that, they work harder, or they work so hard that sometimes you have to tell them to pull back a little bit instead of having to push them to do more. That's what this staff, with this new staff under Josh McDaniels, that's what they feel like to me. They feel like guys that don't want to say, hey, man, come in for some extra workout, or hey, man, come in, we're going to do this extra drill. It's more like guys that are just naturally know that, you know what, today's an off day, but I need to go get some treatment and just do it instead of have to be encouraged. That's the impression I get from this staff, is that they want self-starters. They want guys that are going to go hard in the paint, that they might have to tell them, hey, man, you need to pull back a little bit. Similar to Max Crosby. Max Crosby takes a couple days off after the season's over, then he's right back on the grind. Nobody has to tell him to get to the facility at 6 a.m., get treatment, start working out, do this and that, work on the offseason. No one has to tell him that. That's Max, and it's just who he is. He can't help himself. And so that's what I feel like this staff really likes, and that's why they like Josh Jacobs so much, because of what he was able to bring to the table last season, where there was times where they thought he was going to sit out games, including the last game of the season when his pops had that heart attack, right? And instead of missing that game, he flew back, basically on a couple hours of sleep and was back out there playing. Even though it didn't turn into a win for the Raiders, he was out there that last game of the season with his team because his pops wanted him to, and that's just the kind of guy he is. So those are the kind of players that I feel like this staff is really looking for. So thank you so much for that call. I do appreciate you. We'll get one more text in from Fletcher in the 603. Say, what up, Q? Fletcher in the 603. I'm stoked with these moves this team is making. We're starting to see what Josh and Dave's mindset is. Reports surface about Carr not being a culture fit, which on the surface seems odd. They bring in Jimmy G again on the surface, doesn't seem great. The culture for the years with the Raiders is a mindset of being average and moral victories. Carr praised effort and almost in his press conferences. He's part of a culture of losing. Effort isn't good enough. Like him or not, Jimmy G has been surrounded by a winning culture. Raiders are parting ways with guys who don't know how to win. They trade Waller for a third-round pick. Waller's not a dog. Dogs don't spend half their season in the tub. It's clear as day that this guy is not putting in the work that guys like Max Crosby openly talk about this team needing. I think they move up to 3 to get a quarterback. Here we go, Raider Nation. As always, Q, keep up the good work. That's Fletcher in the 603, and I don't even have to say anything because that kind of goes back to the last explanation that I broke down when it came to what this staff is looking for, and I agree. I like Darren Waller a lot. I love his story probably a little bit more, right, than even his play on the field. I mean, he's just a really good dude, was great in the community here. Always root for him. But I don't think that this staff saw enough effort and enough, ability. Like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, right? I mean, if he had given them a little bit more and known the playbook a little bit better and ran the routes right and wasn't running into Devontae Adams in the back of the end zone, right, and then he was banged up a little bit, I think that they may have had a little bit more, leeway with them. But instead, I think they just say, you know what, it's just not worth it. Again, that's just my gut feeling. They haven't told me that. It just seems like that's what this staff is all about. So thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. And that's all I got for today's show. Again, we're going to be meeting at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center around 11 o'clock this morning, and we're going to talk to all the free agents that came in from the outside. And when I'm talking about safety Marcus Epps, I'm talking about cornerback Brandon Faison, wide receiver Jacoby Myers, linebacker Robert Spillane, wide receiver Philip Dorsett, and then quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo will be at noon. So I'll have a lot of sound that I'll bring to the show to close out the week tomorrow from the media day and the media sessions that we have with those guys. And of course, we'll have more news and notes, and we'll get some calls and texts as we close out the show on Friday. Again, thanks so much for making the Locked On Raider podcast your first listen each and every day. And remember, you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode of the Locked On Raiders podcast as soon as it's available. My man Ari, make sure he has it up and about each and every day, and we do appreciate you for that. So until Friday's edition, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.